Just exactly how powerful was the Corleone family among the five families of New York? To answer this accurately, we must rely primarily on what is depicted in the novel The Godfather, rather than the film, as the movies focus intensely on the internal affairs of the Corleone family and don't provide as complete of a picture of their immense overall strength. While the film at times reflect Vito's power, such as the pivotal meeting between the families, they don't show the full space and scale of Corleone's influence. We need to zoom out further to glimpse the true extent of their dominance over organized crime in New York. In terms of soldiers, or made members, the Corleone family was characterized as being roughly as powerful as the other four families combined. Both exposition within the novel and declarations from figures like Sonny and Luca reinforced the Corleones' military might. However, it wouldn't be right to say that the soldiers from their three groups alone equated the straight numbers of the other New York families. The novel gives us a hint that part of what made the Corleones better was their stronger leadership and organization compared to normal crime family structures. They showed more adaptability and unity fitting for their status as the top dogs on the streets. This advanced structure acted to increase their power more than mere headcounts. Even after the attempts on Vito's life neutralized his political alliances and business holdings, Sonny still managed to stall the onslaught of the other four families, a testament to the hardened fighting skills he could call upon. His resistance against steep odds is a true indicator of the Corleones' battle-ready strength under arms at their operational height. Politically, the Corleones had built significant connections over many years under Vito's leadership, far surpassing other families. Vito had rigged elections and paid for politicians through various secret means, building a huge political network that gave him significant control. He also owned many reporters and publishers, allowing him to influence the media landscape. However, these connections were reliant on Vito personally, and became useless when he was shot and incapacitated. With Vito out of the action, the family saw an opportunity to move against the Corleones. The Corleones also derived great wealth from front companies like Genco Pura Olive Oil Company and legitimate businesses they had secretly acquired over time, including whole shopping malls and office buildings. Only the Barzini family had a similar diversified business portfolio, but not to the same extent of outright ownership like the Corleones. Still, like their political power, the family's wealth was under the sole control of the Don. While many view the Corleone family as extremely and undisputedly powerful based on the films, I believe their dominance has been exaggerated, especially when analyzing the original novel. As powerful as they were at the beginning under Vito's leadership, key events showed how precarious that position truly was, and I'll show you why. In the beginning of The Godfather, the Corleones are, well, the most powerful family in New York. Though they have the unions and the gambling, their greatest source of that power is the judicial and political connections Vito Corleone has painstakingly cultivated over several decades. They also had, from a military point of view, the two greatest generals in the criminal world, Luca Brasi and Sonny Corleone. Yes, Sonny was a great general. It might surprise some people who only watch the movie, even though the film doesn't really show us clearly what he was doing for the family on a daily basis. The novel provides much more insight into Sonny's day-to-day role overseeing the family's criminal operations and enforcing their authority on the streets. Like I said before, Vito has rigged elections and paid for politicians to run for office and win, and he's bought off judges and law enforcement. The Corleones even have reports and publishers in the newspaper business on their payroll, which was the internet of the era. If you wanted to get a message of disinformation out to the world, it was through print. Television and radio were only just beginning to begun as mass media outlets, and Vito protects his political and judicial connections jealously, because he knows narcotics would be the end of those connections. Then, the meeting with the Turk, Virgil Sollozzo, followed by the death of Luca Brasi and the assassination attempt. I think people sometimes underestimate what the death of Luca Brasi did to the Corleone family, both in appearances to the underworld and internally within the family. Specifically, it made the Corleones much weaker. Vito being laid up and almost assassinated a second time is an indication that the Corleones immediately lost a great deal of power with the death of Luca. Consider Sollozzo. Almost certainly would have never attempted to get at Vito a second time, if Luca Brasi was still alive. Between Luca Brasi and Sonny Corleone, Sollozzo and Barzini and Tattaglia would have had their hands full. With Luca and Sonny leading a war, the Corleones would have been too much for even the other 4 of the 5 families combined to handle. But once Luca was gone, Sollozzo and Barzini and Tattaglia began to run rampant across Corleone territories. Now, we know Sonny still lived for a time, but we also know once Michael assassinated Sollozzo and McCluskey, he had to flee Sicily, and Vito was sent to Las Vegas under the protection of Mo Green. These were not the actions of the most powerful family in New York. These were the actions of a family that had lost respect, and therefore strength in the face of adversity. Of course, after Michael and Vito leave New York, Sonny took the Corleones to the mattresses, where he began to wipe the streets of New York with the other families. It's emphasized in the novel that Sonny was cleaning all the other families' clocks. That tells us Sonny was reestablishing the Corleone strength, and it was working. But again, one has to have lost strength to reestablish strength. And then, what happened to Sonny? Yeah, Sonny was shot to death on the Jones Beach Causeway, betrayed and set up by his brother-in-law, Carlo Rizzi. This is where I think things get a little muddy. The Corleones had lost the tremendous strength of Luca Brasi and Sonny Corleone, but none of the other families really had the power to take up the mantle of most powerful family in New York. At this juncture, the crown of King of the Urban Jungle was still sort of up for grabs, although the Corleones were clearly now back on their heels. Also, up to this point, Vito had always been somewhat of an omnipotent figure in the underworld. Lives and deaths were up to his command. But after the death of Sonny Corleone, Vito had to relinquish much of his power in order to restore peace and order to the streets of New York. Vito basically agreed to tie both hands behind his back, giving Barzini and Tattaglia what they wanted, which was no further retaliation, and access to the judges and politicians that Vito had been so close-fisted with prior to the meeting of the Commission to End the Street War of 1945. Even after agreeing to Barzini and Tattaglia's demands, Vito knew that Barzini was still the true mastermind behind the attacks. He was now in an enormously weakened position, no longer able to directly act against his enemies. The multiple betrayals that followed showed just how weakened the Corleone position had become. Vito's own chauffeur, Paulie, and his longtime ally, Tessio, both turned to Barzini, demonstrating how the latter had now supplanted Vito as the most influential boss in the eyes of many. It wasn't until Michael carefully executed his strategic takedowns that Barzini and Tattaglia's lust for power was finally extinguished. The elaborate planning required, culminating in multiple ambushes, revealed just how diminished the Corleones had become. They could no longer directly impose their will, and instead had to resort to deception. Only through Michael's cold calculation and tactics were the family able to reclaim its former supremacy. So in the end, were they the biggest and baddest? Hell yeah, in their prime. But the novel also reminds us that absolute power is fleeting. One wrong move and your whole house of cards can crumble. I hope this analysis has given you all a new, deeper appreciation for the Godfather storyline beyond just the movies. Let me know if you have any other questions, and don't forget to drop a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and also subscribe for more content like this. See you soon.